Happy Wednesday, everybody. I feel really nervous because I feel like I am the last thing you have to get through to get over the hump of the week, and I'm the last thing that you have to deal with before you start enjoying your weekend. So I come bear gifts. It's an Amplitude mug. It says, do a little dance, which we just all did, and make a little chart, split test tonight. And this is, I'm going to give it to Andy, and whoever asks the best question, Andy gets to decide. We'll get this mug. I thought it's really fitting to sit on a growth designer's desk. I'll just put it over here. I'm going to keep the mug for myself. Okay, that works too. And yeah, so as was mentioned earlier, my name is Ran, and I'm currently designing at Amplitude. And glad to hear that Robbie uses Amplitude. And our brand ambassador, Lex Roman, is over there as well. So today we're going to talk about data. Hopefully you find it exciting, and that's why you're here, right? In case you're not familiar with Amplitude, we are a product intelligence platform where we work with teams of all sizes, from Fortune 500 companies to really tiny startups, to help them really dive into their data and hopefully apply growth best practices to grow and scale their digital business. And some of the brand you might recognize and you might use it every day, including Envision, Figma, Dropbox, and such. So give you an example of exactly what type of data that Amplitude tracks. So once you incorporate the SDK, Amplitude pretty much tracks all of your user actions that you care about inside your app, no matter if it's a web app or mobile web. So as you, this is an illustrated example. This is not how Twitter currently instrumented Amplitude, but as the user go through your app and they do stuff and they scroll, oh, my animation didn't come through. It's supposed to be scrolling, and then if they play a video and we put all of those actions into a timeline, and then you'll be able to view all of your users' data into aggregated level and start making analyses. So hopefully you will discover actionable insights to help you improve your product. And as of today, we have tracked over 7.5 trillion user behavior data. And I can't even count how many zero there is in this number. What a great time for us designers, because we have a wealth of data for us readily there for us to use. And the question here is, are you taking advantage of all that data? And I think notoriously, designers don't like data, except Lex. So jokes aside, I really want to take a quick survey. So with a show of hand, if you're a designer and you are already incorporating data or data insights into your design. Oh my gosh, I see so many hands. About like 40% of the hands. That's why I'm here. I love you guys, and I feel like I found my tribe. And there's like our tribe elder, Weiss elder over there. Yeah, and for the rest of you, I hope after today's talk, you feel a little bit less intimidated and have some sort of ideas on where to start and start incorporating more data in your day-to-day process. So if you're a designer, and especially you're user-centric, you're probably already using some sort of data, like qualitative data. And we do that all the time. We talk to users, we run usability testing. And those are fantastic. Those are qualitative data that tells us why, and we get to absorb users' emotions and feelings. And quantitative data on the other side, those are the numbers or analytics, those things designers don't like. They're good too. They have very different characteristics. Like it tells us what you can think of, that's what your users do in the wild. It shows you almost, like it tracks almost everyone who is engaging with your product. compared to for qualitative research, and you do it in such a small sample size, like 10 to 20 people, and you have to always be there, no matter if it's face-to-face study in a lab or online remote testing. Like you have to always be there. It's kind of slow. You have to wait for scheduling, email, and all of that. And data is a lot cheaper in that sense comparing to qualitative study. And once this instrument is there for you to use, like anytime, how many times a day, it's always there. And I'm not saying that data is superior in this sense, because both type of data have its pros and cons. Like one simple thing is you can talk to people, but people lie. It's a classic how frequent do you floss sort of situation. But if I actually track your floss box and I actually measure the length of floss you use every week, I know exactly how often do you floss. And then data is not perfect either. So humans are like really good at spotting patterns and come up with stories. And sometimes these stories are just not true. I don't know if you're here on Monday, but Bengali had this like fascinating story about they discovered that Facebook users in India has a really high activity of unfriending. So you might be telling yourself, oh, wow, Indian people like to friend people, and then they get into argument, and then they unfriend a bunch of people right away. But that's actually not true. How they find out the why behind this like bizarre activity is they flew their team over to India, and they realized they have very common names. So it's almost impossible for you to find your buddy if you have a very common Indian name. So it's like a fascinating story of why you shouldn't just be using either or. Qualitative data and quantitative data should always be using hand in hand at the same time. Like you form hypotheses either from like your research or from data. It's very necessary for you to actually validate it from the other side as well. And just want to emphasize here, I think we're at a time that is not whether as designers we should use data. I think the reason why you're all here is we believe we should start using data, because data is a wonderful tool for us to get a better insight about our users and really amplifies our learning, really amplifies our design. And now I'm going to give you some real examples on how the design team at Amplitude uses Amplitude to design for Amplitude. It's a very meta experience. So this is actually very similar to what me and Yelena talked about a year ago. Data can be very useful before you sit at your desk pulling up Sketch or your sketchbook. It's really useful for you to discover who you should talk to for your research. I don't know how you guys do your user research recruiting, but a lot of people will hold a sign in Starbucks and Union Square, so like talk to me, free coffee, or you can segment people based on some sort of marketing segment, like your job title and your geolocation. But that's not very effective because we are all designers in the San Francisco Bay Area, so we must respond to the same thing exactly the same. That's probably not true. Isn't it better to just segment people and target people based on how they interact with your features and your product? So here are just some examples of this. We call it behavior cohorts, which is groups of people based on certain behavior pattern, common behavior patterns. So like the first example I have here is called Whales of Amplitude. So we took the term from the gaming industry. Those are people who have submitted over 5,000 meaningful queries inside Amplitude in a month. I think my number is way below 1,000, and I work there full time. So those are real power users that uses Amplitude all the time. So we have done research to figure out how do they find value from Amplitude. And on the contrary, there's like recently churned user. The criteria for that would be, so they are active in 2 periods prior and no longer active anymore. So we consider those recently churned user. And you can get really granular, like the third example. Those are people, I just realized I had a mistake. So those are the people who submitted a lot of queries. So they are actively using Amplitude, but never created a chart. So those will be an interesting group of non-creators that we want to talk to and figure out why, what's causing these type of interesting behaviors. And there's just like all sorts of things you can segment on based on whatever type of features that you're designing. It could be for your new users. It could be based on engagement level, like your whale users versus like people never create any content. Or it can be based on expertise. Are they novice or are they really advanced? Are they paying or are they a free user? And you can even just start combining all of them together and just get really highly targeted, like free trial users who are new and did a lot of engagement with your product but never buys. Things like that. And the next thing you can do is to start measuring your design success with data and analytics. So traditionally, the product development process is like this. So you learn from your research. So you did research, you had hypotheses, and then you go to your drawing board and did a bunch of design iterations, and you send it to your engineering team, you build something, you launched. And then there's a lot of high five going on, champagnes, tequila shot, everybody is happy, but what happens next? Like, how is your feature doing? Are users loving your product? Are they finding value? Nobody knows. And what we should do is you need to measure after you launch your product. If you don't measure, you're missing out on huge opportunities for you to learn what's working and what's not working with your design. And as you're digging through data and you measured and you see it either exceed your expectation or it failed, and you'll probably start generating more and more ideas with your creative minds. And suddenly this linear process become a loop. And then you take all your learnings that you got from your data analyses, and then you can put it back to your drawing board and start building improvement. As you go through this loop over and over again, chances are your product will get better and better, and so is your design intuition. And this is how we all become the Steve Jobs of the world. And one thing, it's the easiest thing that you can measure is I launched a feature like CSV upload. How many people has used it? So this is what you're looking at now is the number of users that has interacted with the feature. But then this is like okay metrics. Like it's about 80 people that are using this feature. This is releases that we launched at Amplitude where you can document all your releases in one place. It's about 80 people, but is 80 people good or is 80 people bad? You don't know. And one simple improvement you can make to this metric is to turn that into a percentage. That's why we say percentage is always better than an absolute number. So now you can see the lines get a lot less volatile because you normalize the data. And this is the percentage of active users that are using this feature. And it's sadly only 1.25% people that are using releases at Amplitude. And there's an alarming trend that's showing up on this chart that less and less percentage of active users are using releases. So that's not good. You better start digging deeper a little bit more too. And one thing you can do is kind of like what you did for the user research recruiting. You can start segmenting users based on unique characteristics. Like in this case, you can see for all paid users, luckily their usage are still flat, they're consistent. It's just for all users, the trend is going down. So there's a lot of hypotheses that I had in my mind, like it could be we just get more active users, like we're growing our user base. It could be this feature is designed for bigger teams, which are more likely to be paid users. And for free users, maybe they work for a one-person startup. Like, why should I document for myself in one place? I already have it. So this is all of these data insights can generate more idea in yourself, and then you can go back to your research and talking to your customers to validate those hypotheses. Oops. And just one thing I want you guys to notice, one error people always make is they just want their usage to be more and more, and like it's the more the better. But it's not necessarily true. We have this analysis in Amplitude, it's called engagement matrix, where we plot all of the dots are your features, your top features in your product. And the x-axis is the number of people who engage with that feature from, like on the left, from nobody to everybody. And on the y-axis is the number of for average user, how many times this person would engage with this feature from like 0 times to all the time. And we would naturally want all of our features to be plotted to up and to the right quadrant. It is true, those are our most popular features in your platform. So those are your bread and butter. Those are what your customer find the most value of. It, like for Amplitude, is all of our most popular charts analyses, like funnels and event segmentations. But based on the type of your feature, successful features can also fall into other quadrants, and that's okay too. For example, if the lower right quadrant, those are the features that are used by a lot of people, but not very often. And we launched a feature called Team Spaces. It's kind of like a Slack channel where you can join your team to share your learnings and analyses with each other. So for joining a team space, we of course, aspiringly, we want everybody to join team space, but we don't expect them to join and over again a lot of times, because normally teams don't change that much. So this feature is a very typical feature in this quadrant. And similarly, if you go diagonally up to the top left quadrant, those are your traditional power user features. They're not adopted by everybody, only by a small group of people who love and find value out of that feature. But if they find value, they'll use it over and over again. So that's why they're in the top left. And one of the analyses we have in Amplitude is called sessions analysis. It's very granular. Not every industry or every team needs to dive into like each individual user sessions. But when they do, they use this chart over and over again. So that's what we think is still a successful feature, because they are finding value. That's why they return and keep doing this type of analysis. So the last quadrant is the tricky quadrant. So it's the portion that you need to pay a little bit attention to. Some of the features will fall naturally in this quadrant, like your admin settings. Like if you are setting up single sign-on, probably one person in your organization is doing it, and hopefully only do it once and not do it over and over again. So they're perfectly fine here. And like this chart itself is something that would go here, because not every organization will do an audit of all of their features. But if they do, we also don't expect them to run this analysis very often. It's more like a quarterly or yearly thing based on how fast you ship. So this feature will sit naturally in there too. But for all of the rest features, if they end up in this quadrant, you either have to take it back to your build, measure, learn loop and go through the loop again, trying to improve it and move it to where it belongs, or it's time for you to make a hard decision if you should just remove this feature completely from your platform to remove the product surface. And yesterday, Derek from Netflix talked about as growth designers, you should be building funnel analyses, which is great. But he put Google Analytics next to funnel analyses, which is not. And today we're going to show you how growth designers can build funnels in other platforms. And like marketing and e-commerce uses funnels all the time because each funnel is a conversion, right? But funnels can be used like for almost every feature, because whenever you design something, you're trying to find what's the behavior I want to drive with this feature. And then you can build a funnel of your ideal behavior and see how effective your design is. In this case, it's the team spaces again. What we want people to do is they sign up, they join a space that's relevant to them, and then they see very relevant and interesting analyses, so they click in and then they tweak because they find something interesting that sparked their interest. And we can see, okay, it's about like 40 to like a little shy of 50% of conversion, which is pretty good. So a lot of people are finding interesting analyses. But we really, like funnels don't give you the next level of granularity of really understanding exactly how people are converting through your product. And that's a natural segue for the next point, which is you can use some sort of path analysis to discover very interesting user behavior patterns. In Amplitude, you have this tool called Pathfinder, and you can also find it from some other tools as well, which shows you the top path that you user take from a selected starting point. And it's okay. I'm also overwhelmed with this chart. That just shows you how complicated user behaviors really are in the wild. And this is the same team spaces example. This is what a team space look like. And as you can see, we have like all the relevant and interesting content, like big and center is over there, is taking up almost all the screen real estate. But according to our path analyses, if you see the green box, about 20% of people, the first thing they did after they joined a team space is to hover on a user profile. And let me show you where the user profiles are. So in this, despite of all the front and center shiny, relevant, interesting content your teammate created for you, which is like big and center over there, people go all the way to the top right corner and hover on this tiny little picture. And according to the path analyses again, not only they hover, and then they hover to the next one, and then they hover to the next one, and then they hover some more. And I don't think, I didn't design the team spaces feature, but I'm pretty sure this is not the designer intended. We have assumptions like people want to make sure they're in the right place. They want to see who is in this space, maybe stalking someone who they secretly admire. But But the point here is you can use path analyses to uncover really interesting stuff that people do inside your app. And just to recap, because I just barfed a lot of data stuff at you, that you can use behavior cohort to select more targeted research participants. And then you get to evaluate your design success with either engagements or feature funnels. And then you can stalk your users using path analyses. Before I conclude today's talk, I really want to emphasize this again. On first day, both speakers have said the same thing. But really, you can't just do data alone in a vacuum. Data and analytics is truly a team sport. Just share your learnings with your team. Slack them a chart, like you find something funny in the data, or you're asking a question, share it with your team, call it out in whatever documentation tools that you use, and really sit in the meeting room and then look at data together. And this is a real tweet. It's not a staged stock photo, that people are actually sitting in the conference room. And if you didn't notice, that picture there is Amplitude. So this is like Christmas gift for us. And if you do sit in a room and look at data together, make sure to tweet us. And that will be early Christmas gift for all of us at Amplitude. And with that, thank you so much for staying this late on a Wednesday.